今から浮きます。
Have you ever consumed a piece of media and thought, wow, this is gonna change everything? You know, in the past, we've had stuff like Pulp Fiction, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Ocarina of Time, hell, even Beethoven's Third Symphony, Eroica, all had dramatic effects in their respective mediums of art. But what about manga? The first thing that would probably come to mind is Dragon Ball, which is considered to be the grandfather of modern shonen because of how it popularized so many of the tropes and ideas that are still prevalent today. Tournament arcs, training arcs, power-ups, the morally ambiguous rival who is still sympathetic and has a tragic backstory that really makes you want to root for them even though you know the main character will beat the rival in the end. There's likely no modern shonen mangaka that won't cite Dragon Ball as an influence. But now that we're in the 2020s, I've noticed a dramatic shift in the way shonen manga is being written. Things are getting weird, maybe even bizarre. Traditional plot structures and tropes are being thrown out in exchange for unexpectedly experimental decisions that oftentimes pay out. They result in stories that are more unique and memorable than many of their contemporaries. I believe this modern shift in storytelling started with one particular manga and one particular author. Of course, I'm talking about Chainsaw Man by Tatsuki Fujimoto. What started off as a seemingly stereotypical shonen series quickly turns on its head, presenting twist after twist that left me stunned. The influence of Chainsaw Man isn't nearly as strong right now as Dragon Ball or the Big Three, but in due time, the ripples that Tatsuki Fujimoto has made in the industry will become waves, and yes, it will change everything. This is the Fujimoto Effect. By now, Tatsuki Fujimoto is essentially a household name for many manga readers and anime enjoyers, but things weren't always that way. So, in typical video essay fashion, we must start at the beginning. Fujimoto was born on October 10th, either in 1992 or 1993. Where can you get this information, you may ask? Well, obviously from his Twitter account where he claims to be his own fictional younger sister who is in her 3rd grade of elementary school. Suffice it to say, the account was suspended because the user's declared age is younger than Twitter's guidelines for being at least 13 years old. Fujimoto's editor, Shihei Lin, actually reported the account when it started leaking information that only him and Fujimoto knew, causing it to be suspended. As of 2022, the Koharu account has sadly not made any posts. On the other hand though, according to Oricon News, Fujimoto was actually born in 1993. In all honesty, the year of his birth isn't that important, but the whole Twitter account debacle just goes to show that he's always been a strange dude. The first work he ever submitted was a one-shot titled, "A Couple of Clucking Chickens Were Still Kickin' in the Schoolyard," or as the Japanese title is rendered, Niwa 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 Tori ga ita. I think I added an extra Niwa in there, I'm not sure, but anyway, he made this manga when he was only 17 years old. Essentially, the story is about a world where aliens have taken over and adopted human culture. The aliens have eaten almost all humans to extinction, except for 2, who are dressed as chickens in a certain schoolyard. This one-shot was first published in 2011, but it was later recompiled with 7 other one-shots in a 2-volume set called Tatsuki Fujimoto Before Chainsaw Man. It's intriguing reading his early works because none of this guy's stories are normal. But also, these one-shots are genuinely very good. I wouldn't call them masterpieces by any means, but there's so much heart put into each and every one of them. I feel like it's easy to tell when a creator doesn't have their heart in their work. I'm looking at you, Gege Akutami. But Fujimoto's one-shots are so unique and wholesome despite being some of the most bizarre pieces of fiction I've ever read. He has this way of introducing characters that really makes you immediately fall in love with them and remain invested until the end. Another interesting aspect about the short story collection is that Fujimoto himself gives a bit of commentary about each work. For instance, at the end of the Clucking Chicken story, he explains that he drew it during a time when the start of his college was delayed because of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. At the end of the 3rd story, Love is Blind, Fujimoto says that it came out because his editor told him that he takes 31 pages to accomplish what could be done in 16. Of course, this story is still 31 pages nonetheless. For the 4th story, Shikaku, you won't believe it, but Fujimoto actually wrote it while having a 102-degree fever. Actually, who am I kidding? He probably wrote most of his stuff while on a fever, or high, or drunk. Apparently, he also tried writing a story while suffering from the stomach flu, but it didn't get approved by his editor. Must have been wild. In the 5th one-shot, Mermaid Rhapsody, Fujimoto was told that he couldn't write a normal story, so that's why he wrote Mermaid Rhapsody, to prove everyone wrong. And you know what? It's decently normal, actually. It's about this boy that skips school every day to play an underwater piano made by mermaids. Eventually, he befriends a mermaid despite them being known to eat people. It's a simple, sweet romance between star-crossed lovers. The next story is wacky, though. It's called Woke Up as a Girl Syndrome. I'll have this panel speak for itself. The 7th story is called Nayuta of the Prophecy, and it features a very familiar character. Apparently, Nayuta is Fujimoto's favorite character that he's drawn. If you know, you know. Apparently, Fujimoto was told he couldn't write unique characters, and that's why he wrote this story. To be fair, most of Fujimoto's previous one-shots did have pretty basic characters, but everything that happens is so wacky that it never really occurred to me that his stuff could be ununique. Now, we reach the last one-shot, titled Sisters. Reading this felt very familiar, not just because one of the characters looks like Reze from Chainsaw Man, but because the story is about two artists that are jealous of each other. Lo and behold, Fujimoto explains that the story is actually the foundation of what would become Look Back, a one-shot he wrote later, which would eventually get its own movie adaptation. At the end of each volume of the short story collection, Fujimoto also gives a lengthy afterword. The stuff he wrote for the first volume is pretty emotional and heavy.
When I was 17, I started art school in Yamagata Prefecture. This was just after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, so all of us must have been asking ourselves whether it was really right for us to keep drawing like before. Drawing felt meaningless, so wanting to make a difference in some way, I went to Ishinomaki as a reconstruction support volunteer. On the bus, there were a bunch of art school and sports school students who were thinking along the same lines as me. We arrived in Ishinomaki and set to work clearing debris out of the gutters of one section of a residential area. We spent the entire day stuffing dirt into bags and carrying those bags to a truck. Yet, we still hadn't been able to remove all the debris in the gutters. I felt a sense of helplessness from the fact that about 30 of us worked on this for an entire day and yet we couldn't make a dent. Everyone was downcast on the bus ride back too. One of the sports school students who worked with me that day remarked that there had been no point in us showing up. I went back to volunteer one more time after that, then I stopped. This was because I was doing oil painting, which gets expensive, and I had to draw manga in order to pay for it. From age 17, that sense of powerlessness has always been following me around. Every time there was another tragedy, my sense that my pursuits served no purpose at all grew bigger. Recently, I drew a manga called Look Back to try and finally vent those feelings. Oddly enough, once I drew it, I think I was able to process them a bit. Looking at this collection of one-shots now, in that state of mind, I remembered a lot of things. Not just that I would draw while feeling powerless, but also that I would draw while really hungry, and how I was always practicing art with my friends. It brought back memories so fun that I have to wonder why I'd only been remembering the dark things. Now I feel glad that I got to have not just Look Back collected into a book, but these one-shots too. As to why I'm saying these things, it's because I was against publishing a one-shot collection. Reason being, I was too lazy to draw the covers, write the comments, etc. But now, I'm glad I got to have it published.
Now, as for what Fujimoto wrote for Volume 2, it is legitimately insane.
Until age 24 or so, I lived with my girlfriend in a 15,000 yen apartment in Yamagata. The people around us were kind and would give us fruits and vegetables, so while we didn't have much, I think we ate a well-balanced diet. Even though we were poor, we had a pet Japanese rice fish. I found it dead one summer. I went to toss its body into the trash like in Parasite, but my girlfriend said she wanted me to bury it, so off I went to the park, alone. I tried to bury it under this big tree, but the ground was too hard. My hands got all dirty, and I had no hole to show for my effort. Out of options, I figured I would pretend I had buried the fish and left it lying there on top of the ground. As I watched it for a little while, ants found the body and began trying to carry it away. I'm not sure what came over me, but in that moment, love for the pet fish welled within me for the first time. I brushed the ants away, and then I ate it. The next day, I had an upset stomach, and when my girlfriend suggested it was something I'd eaten, I came up with some lie to cover up the fact that I'd eaten our pet fish. I've had people get mad at me many times throughout my life, and when I'm scared of that, the lies just spill out. Most of the time, I get caught in them, but that time, I didn't. That brings us to now. The memory of lying to my girlfriend is far stronger than the guilt of eating our pet fish. Please allow me to confess my sin here.
Yeah, he's insane. Now, as a side note, I do have a friend who also once ate a goldfish, so I guess that makes 2 people that I now know are goldfish eaters. In any case, I must note that the short story collection doesn't include 3 other stories that were never actually published. These stories are Paper Plane, Sense of Justice, and Sword of Revenge. There's basically no way to find these one-shots because they were made for competitions and only editors and judges have ever seen them. One can only guess the creative leaps and bounds he must have taken with these ones. Or maybe Fujimoto doesn't view them as his best work and decided not to have them published. Who knows? But for someone with such a prolific number of short stories, with one of them winning awards, it was about time he got his first major serialization. From April 2016 to January 2018, Fujimoto published Fire Punch, which is about a man that punches with fire. It's also one of the most emotionally painful things to have ever been written. Let me explain. The story takes place in this world that has succumbed to an ice age, making it difficult to find and produce food. Also, some people have superpowers known as blessings. The main character, Agni, and his little sister, Luna, are both blessed with regeneration, so they cut off their arms and feed it to their fellow villagers. One day, another blessed individual named Doma visits the village and offers to take Agni to the city of Behemdorg, where he could live a better life. Then, Doma finds out that the villagers are cannibals, and so, out of disgust, he burns them all. Oh, and his flames never go out until they completely destroy what they are burning. What happens when you put an eternal flame on a dude with crazy fast regeneration? You get pure agony. Hey, just like the dude's name, right? Agni's little sister has a much slower regeneration rate, so she isn't able to survive, but before she dies, her final wish is for her brother to live. Despite how much Agni wants to give up and turn off his regeneration powers, he respects her wish to live, and he seeks out revenge against Doma. That is the first chapter, by the way. It is pure insanity, and it may very well be the most compelling and unique setup for a revenge plot I have ever seen. But Fire Punch is Fujimoto's first long-running serialization, and it is definitely rough around the edges. In fact, two of his assistants working with him at the time, Yuji Kaku and Yukinobu Tatsu, were both older than him and actually helped coach him. By the way, Yuji Kaku later went on to create Hell's Paradise, and Yukinobu Tatsu later went on to create Dandadan. I have more to say about them later, but as of the serialization of Fire Punch, Fujimoto's relationship with his assistants was more akin to peers rather than an apprentice and a student. Together, they were able to grow, learn from each other, and become very weird, as shown by the work they produce. Even though Fire Punch was published on the Shonen Jump Plus website, it definitely does not feel like a shonen. It doesn't follow the typical formula, and it is unbelievably dark if you could not already tell from the first chapter. Agni is just basically tortured throughout the entirety of the story, similar to a certain someone. But as with Fujimoto's past one-shots, the beauty of Fire Punch lies in just how amazing each character is. They aren't just two-dimensional caricatures, they're people with dreams, regrets, hobbies. They're all mentally insane, but that's the charm of Fujimoto's writing. It's impossible not to fall in love with each character, so it's absolutely heart-wrenching when Fujimoto decides to kill them. And yeah, he kills a lot of characters, especially the popular ones, because he's a maniac like that. So watch out in the next popularity poll, because it is just a hit list. Essentially, Fire Punch feels like Tatsuki Fujimoto trying to get the hang of weekly publication and long-form writing. While it's not a perfect story, it would help pave the way for his second major serialization, which would become an absolute smash hit. The initial image for Chainsaw Man came about when Fujimoto was still writing Fire Punch. He imagined a person with a chainsaw sticking out of his head and fighting devils, so he decided to give this character the name Tenshi, which means angel in Japanese. But Fujimoto felt that it would be more fitting to give the character voiced consonants, so the name was changed to Denji. And so, Mr. Chainsaw Man himself was born. A lot has already been said about this series, but it is such a well-written story. It really feels like Fujimoto was finally able to take all his crazy ideas and package them in a way that keeps it easily marketable to a wider audience. And I'm not just hyping it up for the sake of hyping it up. Chainsaw Man is so amazing because of the story's unique movie-like structure and its incredibly memorable characters and how they're developed. When it comes to how the manga is paced, it essentially feels like a series of 3 or so movies, which isn't too far of a stretch considering how much Fujimoto does love movies. The manga is so fast that you could easily read all of the Public Safety Saga within a single sitting. The story is highly streamlined to the point that there's basically no useless chapter. No arc ever extends its welcome. Fast pacing in and of itself is nothing unique, but I seldom come across a manga that truly feels cinematic. Fujimoto doesn't bother with fluff dialogue and instead lets the characters' facial expressions and body language speak for themselves. I'll talk more about the art and paneling later, but another reason why the pacing is so fast is because probably 40 to 50% of the chapters are just fight scenes. Of course, the bombastic and climactic moments are only a spectacle to see because of how well Fujimoto writes the slower, more intimate moments between them. One of my favorite moments early in the story is the drinking party after the Eternity Devil arc. Not just because of that infamous puking moment, but because of the character development. When writing a story, character development usually comes in 2 main forms. Either A, the audience learns more about a character, or B, the character changes in some way. According to this definition, there are a handful of methods to develop a character, but the main way Fujimoto does this is through decisions. Let me give you an example. After Denji gets blackout drunk from the drinking party, Himeno takes him home, and they get a little frisky to the point that Himeno offers to have sex with Denji. Up until this point, you've seen Denji as a shallow-minded, sex-crazed, horny teen that can only think with his dick. You would expect him to jump at this opportunity to lose his virginity, but he doesn't. He finds a lollipop that reminds him of Makima, and he says no for some reason. So yes, Denji is horny on Maid, but he is still loyal to his promises. Not just that, but he's loyal to his friends, or whoever seems like his friends. It may not seem like it in the beginning, but Denji has the same unyielding determination to stay true to himself that other amazing shonen protagonists possess. This little moment isn't some crazy decision that will determine the fate of the world, but rather a tiny snapshot into Denji's messed up psyche. It allows the audience to empathize with him just a little more. It also allows us to realize that he does, in fact, have the capability to look past impulsive urges. It develops his character. On the other hand, let's look at Himeno over here. She doesn't get that much screen time, but Fujimoto utilizes a special character development trick that helps the audience really care about her in a short time. Relationships. Specifically, her relationship with Aki. By now, we've already seen quite a bit of Aki, so when we are shown how important Himeno is to him, we begin to care about her too, because if she were to be hurt, Aki would also be hurt. In turn, this push and pull in the relationship naturally lets the audience learn more about Aki as well. Something like this doesn't require too much time to build up, allowing Fujimoto to keep the pacing lightning fast, even when exploring characters' backstories. It never feels like he's slowing down the story because we're learning intriguing things about characters we already care about, and we can see how the things that happen to them affect the people around them. Contrast this to the catastrophe that happens when you insert a backstory in the middle of an isolated fight in a flimsy attempt to humanize a character that has no major emotional connection to anyone else in the story. Of course, great pacing and great characters are a staple in any good story, but what actually makes Chainsaw Man revolutionary? I'd say it once again comes down to two things: Fujimoto's art and his absurdity. For starters, Fujimoto's drawings are actually not that good most of the time. This is because he didn't formally study drawing, rather he focused on oil painting in university. Some of his characters are drawn a little awkwardly, especially when they are moving around, but it's not bad. He's able to get the point across. And of course, the spreads are amazing. You see, the one thing that really separates Fujimoto's art from others is his super creative use of paneling and shots. Here are some examples. In this one, Fujimoto literally draws a first-person shooter. In this one, a finger flicks Aki's weapon from off the page as if it's actually an otherworldly entity. Here's a page that is split by a row of decapitated heads. In this page, each panel is split by an arm. It's crazy cool designs that you can rarely find in other places. Finally, here's a series of still shots showing the Ghost Devil, highlighting how Fujimoto utilizes freeze frames and continuity shots unlike anybody else, giving you a glimpse into a character's psyche with just a couple of panels. It's akin to the storyboards used in filming. Even some singular shots of characters are able to convey such deep emotion, even if their faces seem kinda emotionless. I know it's not from Chainsaw Man, but this drawing of Agni is his most famous example. Even though it has been memed to eternity, the drawing still manages to depict what a face of raw suffering would look like. Fujimoto has a distinct style that doesn't just use manga as a medium. No, he pushes it to the limit, showing what is possible in something that only consists of black and white still shots. The other revolutionary aspect of Chainsaw Man is how it uses such weird characters and plot decisions to really breathe life into the overall story. Sometimes, especially in a series like JoJo, bizarre things just kinda happen for no reason. But in Chainsaw Man, there's no bizarre moment that really feels like it was gratuitous. Denji himself is the embodiment of weird. He's a protagonist that shouldn't work because his motivation is basically just to touch boobs. But it's all a facade for Fujimoto to make you think he's shallow. All these weird Denji moments that are taken out of context are actually really sad once you've gotten a grasp of him as a character and the things he struggles with. There's even that scene when Denji and Aki kick a guy's balls until he passes out. It seems strange on the surface, but that moment has been built up since chapter 2, and it's an amazing moment of catharsis and bonding for the two main characters. Denji is someone that goes completely against your typical righteous shonen protagonist, which is what makes him more empathetic, more human. In fact, it seems that the days of the paragon main character are over. Even though characters like Luffy and Naruto are some of my personal favorites, it's difficult to write a compelling protagonist that always does the right thing no matter what. The reason why Luffy and Naruto are so compelling is because despite how they don't change themselves, they're able to change the people around them, and you gain this feeling of catharsis when they're able to overcome adversity to make the world a better place. Other times, you just have a perfect character that does perfect things and doesn't really struggle, and that sucks. I don't believe that the popularity of Paragon main characters will drop anytime soon, but people will start to question their relatability and quality compared to a protagonist with flawed traits that mirror what it's like to be a flawed person in real life. With the growing acclaim of an anti-hero manga protagonist, the trend will only become more prevalent in the future. To put this all together, Chainsaw Man isn't the most original series by any means, but is able to combine various aspects that break the current mold, providing a fresh new experience for manga readers. In every scene, there's this Fujimoto touch, where even the most normal ones are able to stand out because of some crazy aspect. I can never predict what's going to happen next, but it's not to the detriment of the story because every moment feels earned. Fujimoto is not afraid to be true to himself in his work, even if it goes against preconceived notions of what a shonen story should be. It's this combination of absurdity, super creative storytelling, and amazing paneling that makes reading Chainsaw Man an experience unlike any other manga, and that's why it blows my mind every time I read it. Due to how popular Chainsaw Man has become, it's inevitable that it will influence other works, but I believe that it will change shonen manga forever. It's something that we can already see in currently serializing works. It's no secret that quite a few of Fujimoto's assistants have gone on to publish very successful manga. It's the quote-unquote Fujimoto Effect, but I think there's an overarching theme between all the manga that his assistants create, and that is experimentation. Take Hell's Paradise, for example, written by Yuji Kaku. Once again, you've got this morally gray character, an assassin on death row who is given a chance to be pardoned of all crimes if he can find the elixir of life on a certain island. You've got crazy shonen action mixed with beautifully horrific world building, all set in an isolated location, making for some of the most compelling conflict I've ever seen. According to the author, he cemented the character designs while discussing them with Fujimoto when they were making Fire Punch. Fujimoto also told Kaku that for the story to proceed at a good pace, you shouldn't sandwich backstories and explanations in the middle of important story beats. Fujimoto also notes that the main character of Hell's Paradise, Gabimaru, is similar to Yuji Kaku, an ordinary person at first glance, but deep down having strange interests. Fujimoto believes that the main character of a story should be similar to the author because it makes writing the character easier, as if your emotions were the character's emotions. If the main character is forced to have feelings other than the author, the story may fall apart. Keep in mind that Fujimoto only said similar, not identical. It's important that a writer can write someone different from them, but the author should feel empathy for their main character. Otherwise, you may be left with an empty shell that only does things because the story requires them to do it. Another successful one of Fujimoto's assistants is Yukinobu Tatsu, author of Dandadan. To give a quick explanation of what the series is about, it's basically a world where ghost stories and aliens are real, and it evolves around the main cast's day-to-day dealings with these weird entities. Also, the overarching plot is about this guy getting his balls back. Yeah, Dandadan is weird, even weirder than Fujimoto's works, and that is saying a lot. It is on a whole different level. Dandadan's, let's just say, unique qualities arose when Yukinobu Tatsu spoke with his editor, Shihei Lin. There was a time when Tatsu suffered from immense writing block and he just couldn't draw. Every time he sent ideas to magazines, they would get rejected, and most of his past works have been axed. So one day, Tatsu's editor simply told him to draw without thinking. Tatsu came up with the idea of Sadako versus Kayako, so he decided on an occult theme, and from there, everything spilled out. And yes, everything is no exaggeration because the story tackles so many different subjects and concepts. But at its core, you've got amazing characters written with so much heart. They're just regular people that you can root for. Yes, they've got powers and they fight crazy things, but they're all uniquely flawed humans, and you just can't help rooting for them to overcome the odds during each encounter. And of course, the art is no short of spectacular. The third assistant to have worked with Fujimoto is Tatsuya Endo, the author of Spy Multiplied by Family. He is probably the most normal person to have ever worked with Fujimoto, especially since Endo only worked with a couple of chapters during the serialization of Fire Punch, and so I can't really say that there's much of a similarity between Spy X Family and Fujimoto's works, since the two authors have really worked together for a long time. Spy Family is just this wholesome comedy with very lovable characters, which is such a far cry from Fire Punch. Too bad Endo doesn't actually like his characters very much. According to an interview, he doesn't feel much attachment because he had to give up on what he wanted to draw in exchange for making something that the mass audience would enjoy. He was given free rein in the past, but he was never able to make a breakout hit. When he did the opposites and wrote for the mainstream, he blew up. It's a bit sad to think about it, especially since it seems like Fujimoto, Kaku, and Tatsu have all become successful writing stories and characters that they love. Endo wants people to take his views of Spy Multiplied by Family with humor, but I do hope he either grows to love his creation or he gets the opportunity to make something he really wants to make. The fourth assistant I want to mention is actually someone who is publishing a new series that's just hot off the press. This is Toru Kuramori, author of Centuria. It's a dark fantasy story about a boy that stows away on a slave ship so that he can reach a new continent to live a better life. The beginning is a bit rough in terms of story, but holy moly does it get good fast. You get this mix of a historical setting with berserk-like grittiness, and of course, everyone's favorite, eldritch horror. This manga is a sight to behold, and I'm excited to see where it's gonna go. After talking about Fujimoto's assistants, I must mention that these people are all amazing artists in their own right. Rendering someone as just an assistant is reductive of their abilities, and I'm not saying that Fujimoto is the one that made them amazing. Usually, the assistant label is used as a marketing term to get more attention on these people. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, they really had this pure relationship that allowed them to learn and grow from each other. If you've been paying close attention though, the 4 manga I've mentioned all have something very important in common. They were all published in Shonen Jump Plus, the online counterpart of the physical Shonen Jump magazine. You see, Fujimoto isn't just shaking up the manga industry with his writing, but also his actions. As he moved the second part of Chainsaw Man to Jump Plus, we now see a golden age of online published manga. Essentially, Shonen Jump Plus is an app and website that doesn't have the same constraints as the magazine, which can only publish a limited number of series at a time. As such, authors are able to publish more experimental works. They have no page limits, and they can publish at their own pace. There is also less pressure for a series to get axed if it's not popular enough. The increased freedom is likely why Fujimoto moved to Jump Plus, allowing him to depict more mature or violent visuals in his art. Despite the shonen name of the site, it also features works that might fall into the shoujo or seinen category. Jump Plus was first launched in September of 2014, but it saw a gigantic increase in usage during the serializations of Fire Punch and World's End Harem. Due to the laxer restrictions in comparison to the print magazine, Fire Punch was able to get away with extremely dark content, and World's End Harem was able to get away with basically softcore pornography. It is the Wild West out there in the online scene, but it has resulted in many amazing series such as the aforementioned Hell's Paradise, Dandadan, and Spy Multiplied by Family. I think the coolest part of Jump Plus is how it has made manga creation more accessible to the public. In 2021, they introduced indie series to the platform, which are works that have no editors and usually follow different publishing guidelines. A semi-popular series called Kindergarten Wars was actually started out this way. Also, there's a separate website dedicated to self-publishing called Manga Plus Creators. While it is not necessarily the best place to grow an audience, one certain series got a gold award and was moved to Jump Plus, making it the first ever non-Japanese series to be officially serialized in Shonen Jump. This series is No Name, written by Rafal Jaki, the executive producer and showrunner of Cyberpunk Edgerunners. In addition, Jump Plus has also been a place for Fujimoto to publish even more one-shots, which have become some of the most popular short mangas of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Look Back and Goodbye Eri. Look Back, which is modeled around one of Fujimoto's earlier one-shots, Sisters, is about 2 rival mangaka who become friends and push each other to hone their craft. It's funny, heartwarming, sad, and most importantly, it shows off a different side of Fujimoto. There's no gore, no violence, and nothing too bizarre. It's just a raw, emotional story of 2 characters growing, showing the struggles of drawing and what it means to be an artist. It's an absolutely beautiful piece of work. Next one-shot, Goodbye Eri, is instead Fujimoto's love letter to film. It's about a boy that gets a new phone for his birthday, and he compiles a film of his mother until she dies. The amazing thing about this story is how nearly every page is arranged in this layout with 4 panels that simulate a recording. You've even got blurry POV shots as the main character moves around. There are only a few times when the layout changes, and they are meant to signify the most important parts of the story. Through its use of the POV camera and the unreliable narrator, Goodbye Eri is able to blend the borders between reality and fiction. But at the core of it all, it's also about a character that has to learn and grow in his life. If Look Back is a personal story about the creative process and the difficulties of choosing that path, Goodbye Eri is the opposite of that, giving us very little credible information about the main characters. Who dies? Who survives? What the hell happened at the end? It drives home the fact that you cannot trust anyone, not even the author himself, which is an interesting message after Fujimoto's previous one-shot. Even though Look Back and Goodbye Eri won't reach the same level of popularity as Chainsaw Man, I still believe they are some of Tatsuki Fujimoto's best works. They are a testament of what can be accomplished outside the standard weekly publication system. While the physical Shonen Jump magazine probably won't fade anytime soon, the existence of Jump Plus allows for the creation of so many more experimental stories that we might never have been able to see on the physical medium. While it employs a shotgun strategy with many series never getting much renown, the few that are able to rise above the rest have become some of the most popular and acclaimed manga in recent history. And of course, at the forefront of this revolution is none other than Chainsaw Man. When Tatsuki Fujimoto was still in university, a female student once pushed his bike to the ground and laughed at him. Instead of feeling bullied, Fujimoto was elated, realizing that he was a masochist. Twice a year, Fujimoto spends time with his grandma in France because he's trying to get into her will. While studying at art school, he was overwhelmed with how many other amazing artists there were, so he vowed that if he didn't become better than his peers, he would kill them. He didn't want to go on the run for committing a crime, so he just kept on drawing to improve himself. All that is to say, Fujimoto is an utter nutcase. But he's a nutcase that has managed to write so many amazing stories throughout a relatively short career, being able to move the hearts of millions of people around the world. He's an anomaly of an author, and you would never expect his stuff to really make such a lasting impact on mainstream media, and yet it will. He's someone who pursues art for art's sake, seeking to tell stories and convey messages that are important to him. He isn't actively trying to be revolutionary, he's just being himself. Nothing more, nothing less. That is the true Fujimoto effect.
好きな牛乳メグミルク好きな生クリーム生クリーム好きなアイスソフトクリーム僕は生きてる好きなたらこ明太子好きなカレーカツカレー好きなご飯コシヒカリ